Hi, my name is Israel Vasquatelli, and welcome to The Turntable, a roundtable discussion featuring music and entertainment business students, artists, and anyone with a vested interest in the music business. And today we have a special guest, Omar Hafez from the Tampa area hip-hop and soul group Nonsense. And you describe your group as a combination of A Tribe Called Quest meets Bruno Mars.
Yes. So first of all, thank you guys for having me on the show today. And our group, it's pretty much Tribe Called Quest meets Bruno Mars, me being more like Q-Tip, and my partner in crime, Cat, being more like Five Dog. And then we have Alejandro, who gets all the girls screaming and crying as Bruno Mars. So yeah, that's kind of our niche when it comes to music.
I like that. So today's theme is survival and balance in the music industry. So I love to get different perspectives from our panelists and also our guest artists. First things first, and this is a somewhat broad question, but I would love to know maybe a little bit of insight in a world where ultimately the barriers to entry are pretty much diminished. In other words, anyone could kind of start now, but there's still expenses, right? Even if you're going to do something grassroots, bare bones, you're still going to spend some money. So if you don't mind maybe sharing some of the basic costs that you might incur when you're starting in the music business. So what do you think?
So as far as us, like touring wise, we always have to use one of our cars. So we'll use mine for example. And from there, like we have to pay for gas, we have to pay for different kind of clothes. You know, when you go on tour, you kind of have to find like maybe motels. You got to ask them, hey, can I take a shower real quick? Because we're kind of on tour. So things like that, I believe, you know, at the end of the day are going to cost money just to even start, just to get your name out there. And then, you know, from our point of view, from being from a hip-hop group, you have the instrumentals, you have recording time, you have all these expenses that hit you. And as a student like me, it can kind of come to a point where like, oh my God, I have school, I have music, I'm paying for both. Like, it's kind of getting hectic. But I think there's beauty in the struggle, and I feel like eventually you can keep hitting that rock, and eventually it breaks, and then you can, you know, have a product for your example. So
Indeed. So what do you folks think? What other just basic expenses, things maybe that we take for granted that you need to get the ball rolling?
There's a great saying that quite many of my friends in the music industry use, and it says, to make it in the music industry, you only need two things: a great deodorant and a great cell phone. With having such a powerful tool in each of our pockets now, there's so many opportunities, whether it's recording, whether it's touring, whether it's communicating and networking, that we have in just this one small device. So I would say one of the best investments you can make in your music business career, whether you're an artist, whether you're on the business side, whatever it is, a great cell phone.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, you know, ultimately, especially in the music business, it's always been about some type of technology, even if it's your instrument. And it's kind of fascinating that we're at a point where ultimately a phone could be a studio, could be a form of communication, could be a marketing tool. So that's a great point. Not to mention a connection, right? You need to have it connected too.
Keep your bills paid.
Yeah. So what else? What other expenses maybe that are obvious or maybe not so obvious that you really need to have on hand before you consider taking this seriously?
I mean, technology's kind of outdated, some of the stuff, but for me it was always gear. Just like, you know, everyone I played with was always a gearhead, and that stuff adds up a lot. So, you know, looking for sponsorships always helps to like kind of offset that if you can get them, but it's still, you know, hard to come by. And then I know I always played in a band, so we needed a place to practice. So I've had a lot of angry neighbors over the years until we could actually rent out a practice space. So yeah, those were a couple that you don't really think about, and then you're like, well, where are we gonna do this? You know, and then next thing you know, you're shelling out money to practice somewhere. So yeah.
Indeed, great points.
You can even go something as simple as supplies. Like you're putting up flyers because you want to make people aware. You want to promote the fact that you're performing. Office supplies, printing, or you know, even if you're using your own color printer or black and white, you still got to pay for the ink, the paper. I mean, these are all small costs that add up over time.
Yeah. And even like, you know, what are you gonna eat? You were talking about that. Like, what are you gonna eat? Where are you gonna sleep? Like, I've gone to full like week or two long recording sessions where people forgot to budget what they were going to spend on food, and then that creeps up on you like real fast.
Yeah, indeed. Sharing ham sandwiches.
Yeah,
I've had people
or Hungry Howie's.
They're like, hey, like you doing a road trip, pack sandwiches, peanut butter and jelly. Do what you got to do.
For sure.
There's no shame in that.
Yeah, at all.
Think about the fact that gas changes, gas prices change.
True.
You know, it fluctuates.
True. Speaking of gas and food, right? I mean, you kind of need both, especially if you're going to be moving around. Let's talk a little bit about sacrifices. So, would you mind maybe even from your own experience or maybe someone that you work with, sharing a little bit about some of the sacrifices that you have to make to be successful in this business, whether it be from the business perspective or the artistic perspective?
Well, I can tell you firsthand, growing up, my dad having been in the industry, first sacrifice is always going to be family. You have to sacrifice that personal time, and it sucks because, you know, I don't know what it's like to have your normal whole family sitting at a Thanksgiving Day table, because the reason being, he's always on the road, and he's always doing what he's doing. So a lot of time, our family's time is spent backstage. Hey, how you doing? What's going on? What's been going on in life with you? Oh, we've been doing this. Unless we go out with him, and even then, you got to get that downtime. So he's like, yo, I'm tired. I'm relaxing. You know, just get with me. We'll do dinner. We'll do lunch. So I actually have learned one of the things is, and it's also helped in business, is you actually can build relationships just over eating dinner, you know, or something with coffee, things, you know, little things like that. So I know that for a fact.
That's a great point. I remember, and I wish I could remember the name of the author now, but I remember reading a book, and it was called Never Eat Alone. And that's what it was about. You got to eat, so make it a point to eat with somebody, whether it's to save a relationship or to maybe nurture a new one. So what else? Sacrifices.
To add to Mike's point, leisure is a huge sacrifice, and it's not just relationships with your family, because of course that's huge, and that's something you give up your time, and so much of that time is taken away from your family. But also, if you're on the road all the time, if you are an artist or you're working closely in the music industry where you're on the road, you don't get to have a house, a family, a dog, normal friendships, or a normal relationship. Those things can't happen. You're not in the same place all the time. You're paying a mortgage on a house that you never get to see. You might be paying for a car that you never get to drive because you're in a van with 7 other dudes who haven't showered in a week.
Well, that's where the deodorant comes in.
The deodorant and baby wipes, very helpful.
For
Necessary.
sure. The majority of my touring years were spent while I was either about, like, my current wife, she was my girlfriend at the time, and then we got engaged, and that's when I was, like, the bulk of my time on the road. We had a place, we just gotten puppies, and it was, so I had to carve out time, you know, while I'm out on the road, we're playing shows, and we're meeting really interesting people, and I got to remember, I've got someone at home that I need to give, like, I had to set aside time and be like, I'm going to go make a phone call now. It's been an hour on the phone tonight, and just make sure that, like, you know, I'm touching base, or however much time you can find. You can't always find an hour, but, you know, like, actually take the time to make time for those people, you know, like you're saying, like when you get back home, make sure that you got time for a meal with them and everything. And then if you are home for a significant amount of time, don't just like sit around watching TV, you know, pack a lot of life into those little moments when you're back. Yeah.
That's a great point. I mean, going back to family, not only do you have to find time to be there for them, but at the same time, conversely, there's some folks that go into business, not just any business, but the entertainment and music business with their families. Anybody want to speak to maybe some of the pitfalls or some of the things that could go right or wrong in that area?
Sure. Just branching off of what I said, I think it's really important. I was very lucky to find someone that understood the creative side of the industry and was like, you know, and honestly, if I could go back in time, I would probably even give her more of a heads up of like what to expect. Like, I'm going to be up the exact opposite hours of you. Like, I'm going to be, you know, I'm going to be working all night long. I'm going to be, I've dabbled in stand-up also. I've been, done some film work. So it's like, I'm going to be in a stand-up club, like in the middle of the night, you know, like while you're sleeping, and you're going to wonder where I am. But just like, trust me that like I'm actually working, and this is part of like my process. So, you know, just getting someone on the same page and letting them know what to expect from the lifestyle, I think is really important.
Right. Yeah. Trust is important.
Yeah.
Trust is important, but then it also balance. Like you see, my wife is the CEO of the company, and we do a lot. People are like, when do you ever have time for each other? Well, we manage to make our business time our time. Like when we ride in the truck together, that's our personal time. One-on-one, we get a chance to talk. We make some of our business outings kind of just also special. Like, hey, listen, this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing that we'll be doing this thing together. So we make it something that it's special. When we go out, we're working together. It's almost like a working vacation relationship where it's like, hey, okay, it's fun working backstage or we're doing something. So you can make a moment special depending on when you're dealing with family in this industry.
Indeed. And ultimately, it is also about support, having that support system, and clearly family you know, could definitely be that or not be that.
Right.
You know, and that I think could kind of, you know, take you one way or the other.
Right.
And I've seen a little bit of both. Not in my life. I've been lucky enough to have that support system, but I've seen things go wrong in other spaces.
Yeah. And even if your routine is weird or unusual by conventional standards, it's still helpful to have a routine, you know? So even if I come home at 1 a.m. from, I don't know, being in a recording studio or whatever it is, like I go walk my dogs and they know to expect that, or, you know, then so it's an unusual time to be walking dogs, but, you know, it's again, it's the routine they're used to. So that kind of adds some comfort into the lifestyle.
Or have a show that you watch together.
Yeah,
Just
true.
no matter
Yeah.
where you're at. And once again, it goes back to that cell phone. That's a good one, Jenny. And that cell phone, you can turn into Netflix. Say, hey, we're gonna watch this
Yeah,
show
yeah,
together.
right.
And that makes that
Something to
moment.
ground
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
exactly.
Definitely.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about health. And in an environment, whether you mentioned touring, where you're out on the road, you're maybe sitting on a bus or the back of a car, depending on how you're touring, eating a lot of food from rest stops or fast food. How do you maintain health? Or even if you're behind a desk all the time, working nonstop, how do you balance that, or don't you balance it?
I think one thing that kind of goes unnoticed is like, so when we go tour, we're not doing like nationwide tours. We're just doing around up and down Florida. But the one thing we always try to do is at least eat a little bit healthier. So like we'll try to cut out fast food, and maybe we'll go to like Publix and like get salads and be like, all right, this is our meal for right now. And then like we'll work what we can later or whatever. But like you said, packing the peanut butter jelly sandwiches just in case. It's the last resort, you know what I mean? And also too, just kind of mental health as well. I think when you're on tour, you know, you don't have that significant other, you don't have that dog, you don't have anybody really except your bandmates to lean on, and sometimes that results in conflict. So you kind of have to make sure mentally you're okay. Maybe you bring your favorite book, or maybe it is that phone call with, you know, your significant other that can help you through that time. So I think we try to maintain that while we're on tour.